The private dining room at the Carlton Club buzzed with sophisticated conversation as 40 members of the Reynolds family gathered to celebrate Dad's 65th birthday. The mahogany-paneled walls, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings of past club presidents created an atmosphere of old-money elegance that perfectly matched our family's social aspirations. This was where 3 generations of Reynolds had celebrated milestones, conducted business deals, and maintained the connections that kept our family at the center of the city's power structure. I sat quietly at the far end of the main table, positioned between Cousin William and Uncle Charles, strategically placed where I could observe without becoming the center of attention. For the past 10 years, I had perfected the art of fading into the background at Reynolds family events. While my cousins regaled the room with stories of their latest corporate victories, I remained the family puzzle piece that somehow never quite fit the established pattern. "Ladies and gentlemen," my cousin Jonathan announced from his position near Dad's chair, his voice carrying across the room with the confidence of someone born into privilege. At 34, Jonathan embodied everything the Reynolds family valued: Princeton graduate, senior partner at the city's most prestigious law firm, married to a pharmaceutical heiress, residing in a mansion that regularly appeared in architectural magazines. Tonight we celebrate not just 65 years of Dad's extraordinary life, but 4 decades of building Reynolds Holdings into a regional powerhouse, Jonathan continued, raising his crystal wine glass. Uncle Richard transformed a small real estate firm into a diversified empire managing over $1.2 billion in assets across commercial properties, investment portfolios, and strategic partnerships. The assembled family applauded enthusiastically. Dad beamed with pride in his custom-tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, every inch the successful patriarch who had built something lasting. Mom sat beside him in her designer gown, elegant and poised after 40 years of navigating high society alongside her husband's business empire. "Our family has always understood that true success comes through proven strategies." Jonathan gestured toward the gathered relatives. "Traditional investments, strategic real estate acquisitions, building relationships with established institutions. These principles have sustained Reynolds Holdings through economic fluctuations and market volatility." I felt the familiar tightening in my chest as several family members glanced in my direction. The setup was becoming obvious, and I knew exactly where this celebration was heading. "Most of our family has embraced these time-tested approaches brilliantly," Jonathan continued. "Cousin Michael just closed a $200 million commercial development deal. Cousin Elizabeth's investment portfolio outperformed the market by 37% last quarter. Cousin David's law practice represents half the Fortune 500 companies in our region." The applause grew more pointed, and I could feel the weight of family expectations beginning to focus on me. At 31, I was the Reynolds family's great enigma. The daughter who had rejected multiple offers to join Reynolds Holdings, who had turned down prestigious positions at established firms, and who had chosen to pursue what my family diplomatically called her entrepreneurial phase. For 10 years, I had maintained an elaborate performance. I lived in a converted warehouse in the emerging tech district, drove a modest Honda Civic, and wore business casual clothes from department stores rather than the designer suits that marked Reynolds family members. When relatives asked about work, I spoke vaguely about technology consulting and helping companies with digital strategies. They assumed I was struggling to build a small consulting practice that would eventually fail, forcing me to return to the safety of traditional employment. The reality was dramatically different. I was the founder and CEO of Nexus Innovations, a strategic technology firm that had quietly become the architect behind digital transformations at Fortune 100 companies. We weren't just consultants. We were the strategic force that helped traditional industries navigate technological disruption, the developers of AI systems that had revolutionized manufacturing efficiency, and the creators of blockchain platforms that were reshaping global supply chains. But tonight, like every family gathering for the past decade, I was just Sarah the disappointment. "However," Jonathan's tone shifted, becoming more serious, "there's something we need to discuss as a family tonight." The conversations around the room began to quiet as Jonathan's speech took on the gravity of a boardroom presentation. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes beginning to turn toward our section of the table. "We have a family member who has chosen to reject the proven strategies that built our success," Jonathan continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to addressing corporate boards. Someone who has spent 10 years pursuing what can only be described as an extended experiment in small business ownership. My stomach dropped. Jonathan was about to turn Dad's birthday celebration into a public intervention about my career choices. Sarah Reynolds, Jonathan gestured in my direction, causing heads to turn throughout the dining room, had every advantage this family could provide. MBA from Wharton, strategic planning experience at McKinsey, guaranteed partnership track at Reynolds Holdings, and connections to every major business leader in the region. I maintained my practiced composure while internally reviewing the quarterly performance metrics of my various business divisions. It had become my meditation technique for surviving these family assessments without revealing the true scope of my professional accomplishments. Instead, Jonathan's voice grew more pointed. She chose to abandon proven career paths to pursue what she calls technology consulting. Working out of some warehouse space, helping small companies with computer problems, generating minimal income while rejecting the security and prestige of established business relationships. Several family members nodded in agreement. Aunt Margaret whispered something to her husband that made him shake his head sympathetically. Uncle Robert raised his wine glass as if acknowledging the sad truth of Jonathan's assessment. Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister and the family's most outspoken advocate for traditional values, decided this was her moment to escalate the intervention. At 59, Aunt Patricia had built her reputation on frank assessments and direct confrontation. She owned the most successful interior design firm in the region, had been featured in Architectural Digest, and never hesitated to express her opinions about family members who disappointed her. "Jonathan is being far too diplomatic," Aunt Patricia announced, standing up to command attention from the entire room. "I think this birthday celebration is the perfect time for some honest family conversation." The dining room fell completely silent. Even the waitstaff seemed to pause in their movements as Aunt Patricia prepared to deliver what I realized was going to be a devastating public evaluation. "We're here celebrating Richard's incredible achievements," Aunt Patricia gestured toward Dad, "but we can't ignore the fact that his daughter has been wasting her potential for an entire decade." The words hit the room like a physical blow. I could see some family friends looking uncomfortable with the public nature of the attack, but most of the Reynolds relatives were leaning forward, clearly agreeing with Aunt Patricia's decision to address my situation directly. "When will you stop playing business?" Aunt Patricia demanded loudly, her voice carrying to every corner of the dining room. "You're 31 years old, Sarah. 31. Most people your age are establishing themselves in serious careers, building real wealth, contributing to established institutions." The family gathering went completely silent except for the distant sounds of silverware being arranged in the club's kitchen. 40 people were watching this intervention unfold, waiting to see how I would respond to Aunt Patricia's public challenge. "Instead," Aunt Patricia continued, "you're still playing around with computers in some warehouse, pretending that helping small businesses fix their technology problems is somehow equivalent to real business achievement." That's exactly when the dining room doors opened and James Mitchell, CEO of Global Tech Industries, walked into the room. The timing was absolutely perfect. James was supposed to meet me at 8:30 p.m. to discuss our latest partnership expansion, but he was 15 minutes early. He strode into the Reynolds family celebration wearing his signature navy suit, his presence immediately commanding attention from everyone in the room. "Sarah," James announced with the booming voice that had made him famous in corporate boardrooms across the country. "There's my billion-dollar partner." The dining room went dead silent. Aunt Patricia's mouth fell open, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Jonathan looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Dad was staring at James Mitchell with an expression of complete bewilderment. James walked directly to where I was sitting, completely oblivious to the family drama he'd just interrupted. "I hope you don't mind me crashing the party, but I couldn't wait until tomorrow to share the news. The board approved our proposal unanimously." Aunt Patricia's face had turned ghost white. She was still standing, but she looked like she might collapse back into her chair at any moment. "James," I said calmly, standing to greet him, "I'd like you to meet my family. Everyone, this is James Mitchell, CEO of Global Tech Industries." The recognition rippled through the room like an electric shock. Global Tech Industries was one of the largest technology companies in the world, with annual revenues exceeding $40 billion and operations across 6 continents. James Mitchell was regularly featured on the covers of business magazines and had been named CEO of the Year by Fortune magazine. "Pleased to meet all of you," James said with genuine warmth, apparently unaware that he'd just completely transformed the dynamics of a family intervention. "Sarah never mentioned she was celebrating her father's birthday tonight, or I would have brought champagne for everyone." Jonathan found his voice first, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Mr. Mitchell, did you just say billion-dollar partner?" James laughed heartily. "Oh, Sarah's being modest again, isn't she? Nexus Innovations is Global Tech's most valuable strategic partner. Our collaboration has generated over $2.8 billion in new revenue streams over the past 5 years." The dining room was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. 40 family members were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to complete bewilderment. "Sarah's team developed the AI optimization systems that revolutionized our manufacturing efficiency," James continued enthusiastically. "Her blockchain supply chain solutions reduced our operational costs by 37%. And the predictive analytics platform she designed for us, that's the technology that helped us secure the $1.2 billion Department of Defense contract last quarter." Aunt Patricia finally managed to find her voice. "Mr. Mitchell, are you saying that Sarah owns a technology company?" "Owns it, runs it, and built it from nothing into one of the most innovative firms in the industry," James replied with obvious admiration. "Nexus Innovations employs over 3,000 people across 12 countries. They're not just our partners, they're revolutionizing how traditional industries adapt to technological change." Dad was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Sarah, is this true?" I nodded calmly. Nexus Innovations specializes in helping established companies integrate emerging technologies without disrupting their core operations. We've worked with companies in manufacturing, healthcare, finance, and energy sectors. James pulled out his phone to show Dad some photos. "You should see their headquarters facility. 60,000 square feet of research labs, development centers, and testing facilities. Sarah's team includes some of the brightest minds in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced robotics." The revelation was creating waves of shocked whispers throughout the family gathering. People were pulling out their phones, clearly searching for information about Nexus Innovations and discovering that everything James was saying was verifiably true. "There's something else you should know," I said, turning to address the entire room. "Nexus Innovations has been the technology partner behind several Reynolds Holdings projects over the past 7 years." Dad's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "When Reynolds Holdings needed to modernize your property management systems, who do you think designed that technology? When you required advanced analytics for your investment portfolios, who developed those algorithms? When your biggest competitors were gaining market share through superior digital platforms, who created the technological solutions that helped you maintain your competitive edge?" Jonathan was staring at me with growing shock. "The Morrison Technology Solutions contracts were handled by one of our subsidiary companies," I confirmed. "We've been helping Reynolds Holdings stay competitive in an increasingly digital marketplace. Your client portals, your automated property management systems, your financial analytics platforms, all developed by Nexus Innovations." James nodded enthusiastically. "Sarah's been telling me about her family's business empire for years. Some of our most successful case studies involve helping family-owned companies like Reynolds Holdings implement technological upgrades that preserve their traditional strengths while adding modern capabilities." The weight of these revelations was settling over the family like a heavy blanket. People who had spent 10 years assuming I was struggling to build a small consulting practice were discovering that I had been supporting their success while building a technology empire. "But why didn't you tell us?" Mom asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Why let us worry about your future? Why let us think you were struggling?" I looked around the dining room at the family members who had spent the evening preparing to stage an intervention about my career failures. Because every time I tried to explain emerging technologies or digital transformation strategies, you dismissed it as playing with computers or avoiding real business. You had already decided that success only looked one way, your way. Aunt Patricia slowly sank back into her chair, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Sarah, I owe you an enormous apology. We all do. I love this family," I replied, which is why I've been supporting Reynolds Holdings' technological development without you knowing about it. But I can't continue pretending to be less than I am just to make you comfortable with your assumptions about business success. James checked his watch. Sarah, I hate to interrupt this wonderful family celebration, but we should discuss the expansion timeline. The board is eager to finalize our partnership for the European markets. I gathered my purse, preparing to leave for what had become an unexpected business meeting. If any of you are interested in learning about what Nexus Innovations actually does, about the work we're doing to help traditional businesses thrive in a digital economy, then we can have real conversations. As James and I walked toward the dining room exit, Dad called out one final question. Sarah, what happens now? I turned back with a genuine smile. Now you know the truth. And if Reynolds Holdings is interested in expanding your technological capabilities, in staying ahead of industry changes instead of just reacting to them, then Nexus Innovations is always ready to help family business succeed in the modern economy. Walking through the Carlton Club toward the exit, I felt a decade of pretending lift from my shoulders. Tomorrow I would continue building technologies that help traditional businesses thrive in an increasingly digital world, while running a company that proved innovation and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Some business games, it turns out, are just billion-dollar strategies that nobody bothered to understand.